Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Stride for the Love of Running webinar series. As always, my name is Evan. I'm your host for the show. Today, we're joined by Coach Ben Rosario. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm good, Evan, and I like your shirt.
I know. This is a throwback to, I think it was maybe late 2015, early 2016 edition. So I threw it on because I knew we'd be doing the show. So I love it. First question, how are you doing during quarantine stuff? It seems like we keep extending a couple weeks, but you're training out there. You're with the team in Flagstaff. So I imagine there are worse places to be quarantined right now.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. I mean, very fortunate. Obviously, we're taking it extremely seriously, and we were actually totally solo for the 6 weeks when our state was under a stay-at-home order. We came back slowly, and we're pretty much, I wouldn't say back to normal because all we're doing is running together outside. That means no weight sessions together inside. People are doing their weights at home. You know, our sports psychologist does a weekly session with us, and that's via Zoom now and has been for months. So those things are kind of a bummer. But like I said, all in all, I think we're very fortunate, and we realize that.
Totally. I want to run through a quick intro before we get into some of the topics that I'm so excited to have you on to talk through. First, you're the head coach and the founder of the Hoka NAZ Elite team. Like I mentioned, based in Flagstaff. You're an accomplished runner yourself. I was scoping out the PRs, and I do want to make a note here that you ran 2:18 in the marathon before carbon-plated shoes were widespread and even a thing, as well as a 4:03-mile PR and a two-time Olympic trials qualifier in the marathon. You also served as a meet director, running store owner and founder, and a co-author. So you're basically super widespread in the running world. So you have a lot of expertise to be able to weigh in on. Anything else for the introduction that I missed or you'd like to add?
That was plenty, man. Okay. I can't even remember all the different things I've done. So that sounded right to me.
Awesome. Well, before I do get into the first topic, talking more about the team, can you tell me how you got into running yourself?
Sure. It's not the most interesting story. It's like most people, classic, ran in a little bit in middle school and then really fell in love with it in high school. Mm-hmm. I will say this, one of the things that was very cool, and this is, I think, important to mention if you're out there and you're in this position, my introduction to running in many ways started even before middle school when I learned about this middle school track meet, and then in the spring and middle school cross country meet in the fall that my one of the teachers at my school directed and put on. Mm-hmm. And really, if he hadn't have done that, because he took the bull by the horns, he was a runner, and he put that whole thing on. And if those two meets didn't exist, I really would not have known about it. Mm-hmm. And I looked forward to getting to the point where I was old enough to participate in those meets, and then I did, and I really enjoyed it, et cetera. And so it's kind of amazing how one person can have an impact on so many other people's lives. And that person, Bob Banty was his name, had a huge impact on my life.
Awesome. And you're from Missouri? Is that correct?
St. Louis, yes.
Okay, yes, St. Louis. And you had a decent amount of running peers that went on to run pretty well right around the time that you started running too. I think Matt Tegenkamp was running in the same area.
Matt Tegenkamp was from the other side of the state, but he was a sophomore when I was a senior. And I remember racing him for the first time at the University of Missouri at a cross country meet. And he's tiny. I mean, eventually he got very, but when he was a sophomore, he was tiny. And I remember this tiny kid asking me with 200 meters to go or something, thinking, who's this kid? And it was pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always the funny small running world, right? Like we end up crossing paths and everything later in life, but everybody originates, and especially in the U.S. when you have all the states and everybody's running competitive against each other. The first topic I had, and I was really interested to talk to you about this, is forming a team. So we mentioned kind of your start in the running world, your experiences on a team. How did that differ throughout your individual career as you went on to start your current team? So maybe talk us through high school, college, and then your pro running. How did the kind of impact of teams kind of inform your running career?
I was always a team sports guy to begin with. I loved soccer and baseball, especially growing up, and then eventually basketball in the 90s with Jordan. And, my friends and I played basketball all the time, and I loved the basketball team I was on as a kid. And so it was ingrained in me in many ways, that team aspect. And then when I got to high school, I was, again, fortunate to be on one of those high school teams that had 100 boys. It was an all boys, private Catholic high school, classic powerhouse cross country team kind of thing, with a coach that was amazing. Still a great friend of mine to this day, Jim Linares. And he was very, very big on the team culture. He treated the 99th guy on the team like he treated the first guy on the team. And so that was formative for me. And then when I got to college, I think I was able to bring a lot of that team culture to our squad and really bring everybody together, because our coach in college was a little more hands-off, to be very honest. And so I think it was up to us to create a team culture ourselves, and we did. And we were able to go from the cellar to eventually finishing fourth in the country at the Division II level in cross country. So we were very proud of that. And it was a group effort. Absolutely. 100%. And so then I got to go to Michigan and run for the Hanson's team for a couple of years. Great years, wonderful years, because the team was really just beginning to thrive. Brian Sell was coming into his own, and Clint Varron was in his prime, and they just started the women's team. So it was just a fun time to be there, and that vibe and that energy was something that I really enjoyed. And I mean, in the back of my mind, thought that I'm a confident guy. I thought that maybe I could do something like that someday, but it wasn't some major goal. But I will say this: when I got back to St. Louis, and after a year, my buddy Matt and I started our stores, Big River Running Company in St. Louis. And honestly, we treated it like a team. It was a team culture there too. He and I were the leaders of a team, when it came to our employees. But then also, in a lot of ways, we had a giant team, because our customers and the folks who did our speed workouts and, our youth team and our training team, it all felt like a team. So, I mean, this has been my whole life.
Right. Totally. And then, I mean, in running specifically, even though it can be an individual sport, when you're going out for your 60-minute easy run just by yourself, totally by yourself, you still have that overall team component that goes into your running too. So that's a pretty good reflection. I did want to ask, you mentioned you're a basketball fan, and I know in at least the professional side, there's the concept of like a coaching tree. Do you have maybe some distinct connections that you have made and associated with your coaching tree in running? Obviously, you mentioned Hanson's, and then college that you ran for. What can you say maybe about the running coaching tree that you've been a part of?
I could say a lot. And I like how you asked it, because a lot of times people ask you about your coaching influences in terms of workouts and nuts and bolts, and that's fine. And I don't mind answering that question. But of course, it's a very long answer, because I'm reading books and articles, and, I'm all the way back to Arthur Lydiard,
Right.
But when it comes to the tree and how I was coached, my high school coach was exactly what a high school coach should be. He was more than a coach. He was a mentor. He was a father figure. He cared about you as an individual, and was just as happy to come in and talk to you, or have you come in and talk to him about your problems with your girlfriend or at school as he was about your running. And that was important. And even though I say that that's what a high school coach should be, I think all coaches should have that to an extent. No matter what. Yeah. And then in college, I had this coach, Ed Schneider, who was a kind of an introvert and a little bit of a curmudgeon in a good way, coach. And if you were going to get, you just weren't going to get a pat on the back from him unless you kicked ass. And he was not going to blow smoke up your butt. Right. If you got a way to go, that means you crushed it. Otherwise, you got nothing. Right. And it was a different experience than high school, but honestly, I learned a lot from it, because to this day, I think to myself, hey, I can't be kissing these people's butts every time they do something they're supposed to do anyway. Right. I think, where do you go from there? Right. So I learned that from Coach Schneider. Kevin Hanson and Keith Hanson were great coaches. Kevin, was a role model to me and is to this day. He believed so deeply in the workouts he was giving us, which I think is so important. Athletes can feel that. They need to feel your 100% belief in your program. He also had very thick skin, which I enjoyed, and tried to model, and am getting better and better at by the years, or as the years go by. The older you get, I think.
Right.
But my point is, he just didn't care. He did his thing, and he didn't let other people bother him. And I think that's a cool trait, especially for a coach, because you can't. You're gonna have some. Some back and forth with athletes that can get a little bit, dicey here and there, but you can't be so sensitive. Mm-hmm. You got to be pragmatic about things. And I think he was like that. And that's why he was a good businessman and a good dad, so I just see him as a mentor. I've also had the pleasure of having a lot of close friends that are coaches and taking things from them. I'll just tell you one guy that I take a lot from. He's younger than me. He was an intern at my store, and now he's this famous college coach, John Oliver. He's a coach at University of Purdue, or Purdue University, I guess.
Yeah.
And, John is a guy who just works his butt off, and he's so passionate, and he cares so much, and he works incredibly hard. And I feel like what you learn from John is if you do that, it will rub off and your athletes will believe in you. Mm-hmm. No matter what, they will. And he's also a great professional. If you do something for John, a few days later in the mail, you get a postcard, thank you, handwritten. Wow. And that kind of stuff is cool too. And so, yeah, I've been fortunate to learn from all sorts of people, but those are the ones that, really had a huge impact on me.
Totally. I remember following, Ohio State cross country growing up, and looking at the runners from Purdue, it was never somebody you worried about. But in the recent years, it's been a total
all John.
Yeah, a flip of a switch too. So you mentioned you opened up running store. You had a huge team there. When was the first time that you thought, hey, I want to start like something else like beyond this? So start like an elite team, actually dive into that pure focus running team. It doesn't maybe have to be the exact date, minute, hour, stuff like that. But was that always something kind of in the back of your mind that because you were so involved with that, it's something you wanted to kind of start?
There was a period of time in St. Louis when it was just a kind of a perfect storm sort of situation where at the same time we had myself, who was still kind of running decent in my late 20s, and a bunch of my buddies were in their late 20s and all college runners. And that was kind of our social outlet, right. So we had Adam McDowell, who ran 2:17 at the Olympic Trials Marathon, finished 37th. We had a woman named Julie Lassos, who made the Olympic Trials Marathon. We had a woman named Shannon Leinert on our store team, who made the semifinals of the 2012 Olympic Trials in the 800 meters. Mm-hmm. We had a woman named Stephanie Hood, who finished top 11 at Chicago and Boston in 2008 and won the Canadian Cross Country Championships. And I was coaching this whole group. And of course, these thoughts entered my mind because it was so incredibly fun. Now, I wasn't dumb. I mean, I understood that this was a sub-elite group. This was never going to become a professional group in St. Louis, Missouri. No offense. It's just you weren't going to be able to get people to move there from wherever they were. These people just happened to be St. Louisans. Right. But we made pitches to different companies to try to sponsor that group. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I guess around that time is 2008 to 2012, I certainly thought I was capable of doing something like that, but it still wasn't my goal in life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And then from like 2012 to 2014, the move to Flagstaff happened, and the negotiations kind of started in assembling like that pro team, because it's not necessarily hard to find a collection of pro athletes in Flagstaff that are either trying to be a part of something or have already kind of been there and stuff. Can you maybe fast forward to that time frame and just talk a little bit about how the group came to be, and then maybe title sponsorship negotiations? Because I feel like a lot of people maybe don't realize, kind of the potential like newness of your group relative to a lot of like older standing groups that are backed originally by bigger companies or have been around for a long time. So how did maybe your journey to Flagstaff and starting the team kind of pan out?
My wife and I moved to Flagstaff in 2012 with our 1-year-old daughter simply to get away. So it was completely based on being as far away from St. Louis as possible. We sold our half of the business, and I was just very burnt out in a very complete way.
Right.
So Flagstaff being a smaller town, mountain town, slower pace of life really appealed to us at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Another coach in my coaching tree, or I'm a part of his coaching tree, I suppose, is Greg McMillan. So Greg was a friend of mine, and I came out and did some marketing work for him for about a year, and it was fine. Greg's a great guy. Once you've worked for yourself, at least for me, I find it difficult to do anything else. And so after about a year of that, I said to Greg, "Hey, I just need to do something else. This just isn't right for me personally. It's nothing against you." And he was totally fine with that. Interestingly enough, around that same time was the final. That ended up, just coincidence, ended up being the final year of his group, 2013. He had the Adidas McMillan Elite group, and he was moving on from that to focus on his online coaching business. And it still wasn't really something that was entering my mind, except for that in late 2013, I was coaching Matt Yano, and we were having some success. And then once Greg's group did officially dissolve, some of those athletes came to us, came to me, came to Matt, and said, "Hey, we'd like to coach me." And so then I don't remember exactly the time of it all, but at some point in late 2013, we were getting this group together. Right. And then by the beginning of 14, that's when my wife said, "Okay, now we know. We know this is what we want to do." And so we treated it much like a business. You have to invest capital in a I think that's the piece that maybe a lot of people don't realize, or unfortunately they're not in the position to invest their own capital. Now, we had money from the store buyout. Right. So the first year in 2014, we funded it ourselves out of our own pockets. And we're talking travel and gear and bonuses. I think it totaled about $40,000 for the year out of our own pockets. But the goal the whole time was to get a sponsor. So we were on social media, and we were creating a brand for ourselves, which we knew how to do from our previous life. And I felt like we were doing a good job, but it doesn't happen right away. So it wasn't until we hooked up with Josh Cox, super agent extraordinaire, to find us a sponsor and to broker the deal with that sponsor. And that ended up happening in the beginning of 15. And what happened is, at the end of 14, beginning of 15, right when my wife and I were about to say, "Hey, we can't do this much longer," we got interest from, I think there was 3 different brands. And so you begin to get a little leverage, right, from a business standpoint. Leverage is very nice in business. And so not only did we have that going on, but then in January, Kellen ran 2:28 debut marathon, Kellen Taylor. So that was the 6th fastest debut in American history at that time. And so that gave us another bit of negotiating power, because our whole pitch was, look, we've got marathoners. We understand the marathon, and that's where the people are. That's where the masses are. That's where the money's coming from. And I guess that put us over the top. A combination of those things put us over the top, and we signed Hoka in February of 2015. Not a moment too soon, I might add. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I remember this time specifically because there was all the chatter on social media. It's like, "Hey, look at this new group. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, they're posting their stuff on social media. They're, expressing stuff outwardly. A lot of times, I guess this is, pre-2015, you didn't have as much access to a Twitter or Facebook or, threads on different running websites talking about just how people are going, being outgoing, I guess. The other thing I remember about this specifically was once the Hoka signing happened, people, I think it was like Ben Bruce running super fast road 5Ks in the Cliftons, because this was when Hoka was also in its infancy. Or I think I remember a post about Matt sanding down the bottom of a Huaka to make it like a little bit lighter and stuff too. So there was this kind of like rawness and openness about like 2 very new groups and like a new brand that was entering the running market too. So that I feel like it was almost like a very interesting intersection of the like lifespan of the group, and then also the brand in general too. And now it's plastered on both of our t-shirts too right now. So
the steps after that, I guess, is when you are in 2015, you signed a sponsor, you have an Olympic year coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, it was mainly a US based team, and now you've expanded to have athletes from many different countries that are vying for their Olympic spots. How did that look into kind of the planning from the business side for you too? Because I imagine you had to go through a 2016 Olympic year and hopefully make some noise there. What did the next full year after that kind of look like from your side?
We definitely wanted to make the team.
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, that was the goal. Absolutely. 100%. And, we came close. I mean, Matt was 6th in the trials in the marathon. Kellen was 6th, led a lot of the race. Kellen came back on the track and got 4th in the 10,000. Boy, I really thought she was going to make it. And and then Scott Falbo was 4th in the men's 10,000, which was big because he was just a year out of college.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time didn't have the name that, of course, he has now. So, that was devastating in many ways to not make the team. But there was never pressure from Hoka. I never felt pressure from Hoka that it was make the team or else.
Right.
Particularly at that time, 2016, because they had just sort of they just made some changes in their marketing department and in their sales department, really company wide. But as it related to us, we had a new sports marketing manager and a new marketing manager to work with, and they were great. Mike McManus, Lee Cox, they've been wonderful from day one and really bought into what we were doing. And it's kind of been all systems go ever since. There was some business stuff along the way that we had to take care of, but it's really been, for the most part, smooth sailing. I couldn't be happier with the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you mentioned there is having the same athletes go from the marathon, performing really well at the marathon, switching gears, going to the track, performing equally as well, going to cross country, running at US Cross Championships, Club Cross. How do you handle athletes with different maybe disciplines? I know that you guys have access to an indoor track there, so you get to practice on an indoor track, but it's not typical for a marathon team or a longer distance team to be able to bounce between all these things. But that's something I feel like you guys do so well. So how does that kind of factor into your general coaching and just the philosophy of the program?
Yeah, the moniker Marathon Group is not one that we have ever used internally. That's something that people have placed upon us. Internally, I would tell you we're just good distance runners, and we try to be good across the board. And whether that's 5,000 meters on the track, 3,000 meters on the track, cross country, roads, we just don't care. We like to race. And if all we did was the marathon, we wouldn't get to race very much. And that wouldn't be very in line with what we believe in. So we're careful, especially now. I mean, our culture has changed over the years, but I would say over the last 2 to 3 years, it's very clear now that this is what we do. We race. And we're not afraid to race, and we like to compete, and we're not out here. We'd like to run fast, of course, but ultimately we want to place high at Boston and New York and at the trials and world championships, etc. We want to, for our international athletes, we want them to compete at their national championships and win, and go to the world championships and compete hard and knock heads up front. Whether it's Matt Baxter taking the lead at the beginning of the World Cross Country Championships, or Alice Wright being ranked #1 in the UK for 10,000 meters in 2018, or finishing 6th at Euros, all that stuff that's what we're all about. And we feel like it's helped us in the marathon, because if you can race, if you can handle moves and surges, then you're going to be able to race that much better in the marathon, and vice versa as well. If you can handle the mental challenge and grind of marathon training and of course the marathon itself, and you come back down to the half or the 10,000 meters or cross country, it's a breeze. You're ready to go. You can handle anything. So I think it all intermingles very well, and for us, it's a winning formula.
Yeah. How do you? I imagine you sit down with athletes and you plan out, a training block, or you plan out some goal races, maybe not right in this distinct time when things are kind of question mark filled. But how do you talk to your athletes that might want to try something? Like they might want to try, if it's a 10K runner, they might want to try their first marathon, or they might want to try their first half or something like that. How do you sit down with like each of the individual athletes and plan out that stuff?
It's pretty much segment by segment.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll sit down after one segment has ended.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look forward to the next however many few months. We'll see what's available. We'll talk about what they're thinking, what I'm thinking. Oftentimes, particularly when the athlete's been here a while, we're usually on the same page. But,
right.
There are difficult decisions sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, next year, if we have an athlete, which we do, several, that want to compete well at the 10,000 meters on the track at the U.S. Olympic trials,
Mm-hmm.
who we absolutely feel have a chance to make the team, what do they do in the spring? Do they run a marathon and then try to come back quickly? Or do we scrap a spring marathon and go, quote unquote, all in on the trials?
Right.
I say quote unquote because I don't think doing a spring marathon necessarily means you aren't all in. It's just how do we get to where we want to be? And, we just discuss these things as adults. Mm-hmm. Though I've coached a lot of ages and abilities over the years, I really prefer professionals. They're just, mm-hmm. It's just, I like a pure sort of relationship, and I like to be able to sit down with someone and just talk things out. And that's really how we do it. And then once we kind of say, okay, this is what we're going to do, then the next step is a sit down where we sort of talk about the general training outline. Right. I sort of show them, hey, this is kind of what we want to do. It's not set in stone necessarily, but you can bet that it's going to be pretty close, at least philosophically. It's not going to change much. Right. And that's kind of their opportunity to say, actually, I wanted to work a little bit more on this. And I'll say yes or no, and put some stuff in there, and then but the point is, at the end of that meeting, that's it. Mm-hmm. Then on we go, and they're the athlete, and I'm the coach, and we know what we're going to do, and we set about to do it.
Totally. One of the other things we mentioned, the sharing on social media and the social profiles and stuff. You guys are pretty unique in the way that you're not afraid to share the training, and you're not afraid to show the journey along the way. Specifically, on your website, you have links to your final surge logs, and your athletes fill out stuff there. They fill out the comments, and I feel like that's one thing that definitely the large majority, if not 99% of the other pros out there, don't publish their stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about just having that open line of communication? Maybe that's from your brand works that way, but how do you sort of think about being able to share that information? Because usually coaches and athletes, they just have that one-on-one direct stuff, but you open that stuff up to the world kind of.
Yeah, I just think it's good business. I mean, number one, I think it gets us more fans, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to sell shoes, we're trying to create ROI for our sponsors. We're trying to sell sunglasses for Rudy Project. I don't know what else to tell people when they ask me that question, I guess in this, people want to know, well, are you worried about it? No, I'm not worried about it. I mean, I don't have anything to hide. I like coaching, but I don't think it's as difficult as people make it out to be in terms of the workouts. Right. Now, of course, the relationship piece is really a challenge, and creating that one-on-one relationship with each athlete is that's the biggest part of coaching, and that you can't see, that we're not sharing because it's not shareable. Right. These little interactions that you have on a daily basis, or when you're riding along on the bike, or when you're driving to a workout, those that's when coaching happens. Mm-hmm. Mile repeats, no shit, Oh, a long run on the weekend? Can you believe it? Yeah. I mean, I just don't understand the secrecy. I mean, if people, that's how they want to be, it's no problem. But I just don't think there's not a lot of secrets to it, really. Mm-hmm. Or a lot of there's not nothing we're doing is revolutionary in terms of our workouts.
Right. Have you learned any sort of things that you've incorporated now over the years? I imagine the answer is yes, but can you think of maybe a couple of things that you've learned just from working directly with the athletes, pretty darn close when it comes to the relationship between coach and athlete? You and Scott Fauble have co-authored a book, and like those parallels going back and forth and seeing that type of communication, how both of you are thinking through that New York City, marathon buildup. that is something that not a lot of people put out there too, but is there some things that you've learned along the way that you kind of internalize now or kind of have shaped how you incorporate training or just relationship with athletes?
I guess maybe I'm better at recognizing who I am and thus what kind of athletes are going to work in our program. I can only be me, you know, and I am happy to admit that I'm not going to work for everybody, you know, and that's okay, you know, and just because somebody's super talented or maybe a great person, if there are certain traits that I can see now that I know just aren't going to work either with me or with the others, you know, and with our program, with our culture, I now know not to I just move on and we just go to some, you know, we just don't sign that person. You know, we I think have a better idea of who's going to fit in our program. And so that's what I would say I've learned is just understanding that, hey, I'm not a miracle worker. You know, I work with some people really well. And what I've said now for a while is if you're the right fit for our program, physiologically, culture-wise, just mental outlook on things, perspective, you're going to do really, really well. Because the people who have been with us for a long time and who are a fit, I mean, they've had great careers and they continue to run really, really well. So I feel quite confident in that side of things.
For a lot of people, it seems like an athlete coming out of the NCAA generally is how athletes, progress to the pro ranks. They just announce all of a sudden, hey, I signed with this team or this brand. Is there more that goes on behind the scenes, or is there something, from your side, you pay attention to the NCAA cross country results, say, hey, I like the way that person runs, or I
love NCAA cross country.
Yeah. Can you tell us maybe what you pay attention for an athlete coming up from those ranks and what kind of might form your opinion on who you might want to talk to once they graduate from college or decide to turn pro?
Yeah, that side of it is I think I'm better at that side of it too. You know, if you're going to make it as a pro, you got to be a winner. You know, you got to be able to compete on the biggest stage. You got to be a prime time performer. You have to enjoy NCAA cross country rather than fear it.
Right.
And so when you have athletes like a Scott Fauble who finished in the top, 25 3 straight years, even as a sophomore was in the 20s, then finished 13th, then finished 12th. With all that pressure at the University of Portland to finish on the podium, which they hadn't done yet, right. And then he finishes 12th and leads the team and they get third. Oh yes, these are the kind of people you want, Right. Matt Baxter, second at the NCAA championships, gives Justin Knight all he can handle, almost wins the race. Alice Wright, runner up in the 10,000. Rory Linklater, runner up in the 10,000. Even the people who, a lot of the people anyway, who have been with us for a long time, you realize now, oh yeah, Steph was All-American in the 10,000. Kellen was third at NCAAs in the mile. They all showed up and finished high on the biggest stage. Right. And I just put a lot more stock in that than one fast time at Stanford. Right. Or maybe you were in a smaller conference and you were able to compete for the win a lot of times at conference. Those kind of things are important too. And I just think ultimately, look, a lot of people can run fast. That's really not a separator. The separator is your ability to compete. Totally. And NCAA cross is always a good marker for that too. We've had a couple of questions that have come in from people watching live right now, so I'd like to ask a couple of those. These are usually a lot more interesting than the things I think up, so I always appreciate when people send them. First one here is, when do you know your coachees are recovered after a big session before getting them to crack on with the next one? So when do you know that your athletes are ready to go? Is that something that you talk about, like when they show up on practice, they maybe look sluggish on warm-up or something? What's your sort of method for evaluation? It hasn't really been a problem for us because we space things out quite a bit anyway. So we never have any less than 2 days between. So I mean, in a marathon cycle, oftentimes we're basically going hard only on Wednesday and Sunday, or maybe even Wednesday, then Sunday, then Thursday, then Sunday. Right. So, we're just always giving a lot of time in between. Other times of the year, we're often on sort of a 2-week cycle, if you want to brand it.
right?
Where it's Tuesday hard, Friday hard, Sunday easy long, then Wednesday hard, then Saturday hard long.
Right.
So again, there's never a hard day with any less than 2 easy days in between. And so I mean, when you do it that way, you don't really need, I don't feel, any special metrics to be ready to go again. Yeah, I mean, occasionally maybe there's a workout that we went overboard on, or I went overboard on, maybe one of the two or both. And maybe I'll say, let's take one more day, but that's pretty rare.
Sure. Do you think a lot of people, if they're in the non-pro setup, they have to work a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 job, they're tied to the 7-day cycle a little too hard, and they just assume that that's the only way they can structure their training, rather than what you're talking about, maybe expanding things out and not trying just to smush everything in the 7 days and have everything magically reset on that next Monday?
Yes, I think too many people do that. Okay. I think if I were recommending it, I would either go with that 14-day cycle I just recommended, Tuesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, or I would recommend just go Wednesday, Saturday, or Wednesday, Sunday. Why do you need Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday? Right. I don't understand that. Why don't you just make Wednesday harder? Right. You don't need to go Tuesday and Thursday. That's my opinion.
Yeah, great feedback. Next question here is, what is Ben's opinion on how amateur runners, often with limited time, can reduce the risk of injury?
Lots of ways, obviously. Yeah. Sleep as much as you can, eat healthy and often, hearty and healthy and often. Limit your stressors outside of running as much as possible. See a massage therapist on the regular and or a chiropractor. Don't smush your weeks together like we were just saying. You know, space out your workouts. Sure. And run easy on your easy days. Easy on your easy days, hard on your hard days. Just the stuff that you honestly probably know, but we don't always do. That's my advice.
Have you found, you know, we can maybe give a little Hoka plug here. Have you found that having more cushion for the shoes that your athletes are wearing when specifically they're doing these long road sessions, you know, I guess we've evolved from pre-2014 when, you know, the maximal stuff wasn't really as popular. It was all about as lightweight and thin as you can. Have you seen that be helpful, you know, aside from plugging the brand too, but have you seen Hoka be helpful for your athletes being more recovered or making sure that their legs aren't absolutely destroyed after hard sessions?
It's all anecdotal, of course, sure. But I would say yes. I mean, I don't see how I couldn't say yes. We have 12 athletes, high level, training really, really hard, and all 12 are healthy right now. That's not always the case, you know. Yeah. But over the years, I think our team has been very healthy. I attribute that to a number of things. Hoka shoes, certainly one of them. They have their line is so complete now that we just don't have anybody that can't find a shoe that they like. Right. You know, everybody can find a shoe that they like, that works for them. We run on dirt roads for everything except our hard workouts. I think that's helpful. I'm not obsessive about dirt roads like some coaches. We just are very fortunate to have so many here. Right. So we're pretty much always on the dirt for our easy runs, and then our hard workouts are always on the pavement or the track for the most part. Occasionally some dirt workouts, but so that's part of it. And then we have regular physio. You know, our AJ and Wes Gregg are our strength and conditioning coaches. They are also our chiropractors. They work at Hypo 2. Hypo 2 has a number of really good massage therapists that we use. So, I mean, that part is just unbelievable. You know, we're constantly getting worked on. And I understand that that's not available to everyone. But I would suggest people get as much work done on them by a professional as they can financially, because it is really worth it.
Totally. Next one here is actually a tangent off of this. This is from Peter. Ben, how hard is it to get your runners to run slowly enough on their easy/recovery days? Are there certain characters on your team harder to rein in than others?
for the most part, it's not that hard to get them to do, especially at altitude, because you really don't have a choice.
Right.
I mean, if you're not running super easy on your easy days, you're just not going to be able to come back and do the hard workouts.
Right.
And it's all about the hard workouts. I mean, I know all coaches tell you that every day is important, but it's not really true. Hard workout days are the most important.
Yeah.
And so that's, pretty easy. But yes, there are a couple people. I think there are athletes that, even though they know, it's just that, and I think amateur athletes are probably, from a percentage standpoint, worse at this. There's that sort of human instinct to feel like in order to believe that you're working, you have to have some level of discomfort.
Totally.
And physiologically, it's just not true. From a training zone standpoint, for these pro athletes, they can go out and run 7:30 pace, and it's fine. And their heart will be getting everything they need from that particular day. To run 6:30 pace is really silly because you're putting extra strain on your muscles and ligaments and tendons. It's just unnecessary for what you're trying to accomplish aerobically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they know that, but it's still that innate sense of, I need to hurt a little bit. Right. And Kellen Taylor would tell you she's probably like that. I think also it's a bigger challenge for athletes who, for lack of a better phrase, they don't really love running. Mm-hmm. They love competing. They love racing. They love seeing how good they can be. They love hurting. Right. And so an easy 10-mile run is just the bane of their existence. Right. I get that. I'm a competitor too. I'm retired. I don't run very much at all. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude. I love the sport, and I can enjoy a 30-minute run, but my running was all about getting from A to B. I wanted to run so that I could be fit to race. Right. And so I do understand and empathize with the athletes who have difficulty on easy days, but they've got to keep that big picture in mind that if it's about the big days, you got to go easy on the easy days. It's proven over time. It's irrefutable.
Yeah, and we can just clip that, and then any new athlete that comes in that wants to run fast, just play that and just have that on a repeater, pretty much.
There you go.
Last question we have right now. What did you do as a coach in your first few years that you now consciously don't do? So this is maybe going off of the subject we talked before. Have you learned anything? Was there anything in your first couple of years that you have just let fall by the wayside or you don't incorporate anymore?
Oh, yes. Okay. I can think of three. I saw this, so I tried to prepare mentally. Sure. I think there's three big things. Number one, I touched on earlier. You've got to buy into that idea that this is how we do it. It's a lot easier now, by the way, after so much success. Sure. But you got to buy into that idea that, hey, we're going to sit down, we're going to look at it, and this is how we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. This idea of an athlete coming to me on Tuesday, and there's a workout on Wednesday, and he or she wants to switch it to 200s or so, I just can't. I'm not going to do that. That's done. Yeah. I'm done with that. So that's done. We don't do that anymore, because then I lose my confidence. And I need confidence too. I'm a human being too. Just like they need to be confident in themselves, I have to be confident in me. And the more confident I am in me, ultimately, the more confident you'll be in me, and ultimately, the more confident you'll be in yourself. So this going back and forth on the weekly, that's done. Mm-hmm. Another one is, and I'll amend that to say, look, if you've been in the program for 5 years and you tell me, hey, could I just do this one thing? Yes, of course, I'm going to listen to you. I'm not trying to be a hard ass. I'm just saying, for the most part, this constant, that's over. Right. Then the another one is always talking about time. Mm-hmm. No longer is a segment based on time. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are moments or particular times of the year where we have to get a mark, for some sort of qualification for the Olympics or whatever it might be, world standard, etc. Okay, yes, we're going for time. But even in that kind of, even in a segment where that's going to be part of things, it's never the end all be all. It's always to go somewhere and see how good you can be. Right. It's always answering that intrinsic question and not focusing so much on these extrinsic things. Right. I've gotten rid of that. That's been very valuable. And then I had one more that I was thinking of. Oh gosh, I can't remember now. Those are the two main ones. Sure. I would say stop worrying about time so darn much, and then just really setting a plan and sticking to it. I think that's important.
So for like maybe a concrete example for the second one is, Scott going to Boston and not like hyper focusing on trying to run under 210 flat and just racing, being there, surging up the hills and just throwing the punches. And then, oh, look, you happen to run under 210 and everything works out okay.
The way you're asking that, you've probably seen me talk about this, but the honest to gosh truth is we never talked about it.
Yeah.
It was never a goal of ours to run under 210. That was the media's thing and other people's thing. And honestly, if athletes, if that drives them, it's no problem.
Right.
It's just we found it just doesn't work very well for us. And, that whole segment was about getting as fit as possible so we could compete up front and try to win the race or be on the podium.
Right.
And, that's exactly how he ran it, and the 209.09 was a byproduct of that, and that's could not be a better example of our current culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more main.
Oh, I know what I was going to say.
Sure.
The third thing.
Yes.
I stopped asking people how they feel race weekend.
Yes.
You shouldn't do that. Coach,
can you talk a little bit more specifically about why you don't do that?
Here's the thing. First of all, second of all, you're not truthfully. If you feel great, okay, yes, you'll answer truthfully. But if you don't feel great, you're not going to answer truthfully anyway. And guess what? You got to run either way.
Right.
So what's the difference how you feel?
Right.
So this is a stupid question.
Right.
So not only should coaches not ask that, but neither should friends or family members or significant others. Stop asking them how they feel. It's a dumb question.
Right. Maybe it goes along the lines with asking, "Oh, have you seen the weather? Did you see it change to 95% humidity?"
Yeah. Right. And it makes you seem nervous, and you don't want to seem nervous. You should be calm and confident as a coach, which I do think. I've always been a confident person, but I think nowadays I'm pretty calm and confident, at least outwardly, to the athletes.
Absolutely. So last question here is talking a little bit more in depth about the great high-performing athletes that you have. They're all great people. I love being able to follow those journeys and just see everything pay off. Specifically, the trio of women that placed 3 in the top 8 at the Olympic Trials Marathon, the bringing tears to your eyes picture of all 3 of them embracing after Alafine won is absolutely amazing. We'll link a bunch of things in the description on the YouTube video, but one of the that picture is just shows a testament to the team that you guys have built. What is it like being there in practice and just being on that team and in that bubble with so many high performing athletes, specifically any city that places multiple people in the top 10 of a race, but specifically a training group that places 3 people that run together, work out together, are all in each other's company. How is it being there? What's that energy like?
The energy, that whole training segment was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 6 athletes preparing for the race. We had 5 of them who were, you would have to believe or say, contenders.
Yeah.
You would have to say 4 of those 5 were on people's short list. Mm-hmm. So, it's not like what happened on race day was a surprise, but what I'm saying is because of all those factors, the intensity of that segment was amazing. I already said that word, but it was just so high. The level was so high. The level of intensity, the level of workouts, the level of mental focus, it was just like nothing we had ever seen. And we also had a camera crew following us around the whole time because there's a documentary being made about that whole segment. So it just had this really cool, special feel to it. And I am very proud of how they handled it because I don't think that it ever got to anybody. Mm-hmm. And part of that is we really established up front that it was about taking it 1 week at a time, focusing on only the next workout and nothing beyond that. And I just think they really did that. They really bought into that, and that made the segment fly by in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And some of the things they did were mind-blowing. They were so fit.
Can you talk about your training specificity when it comes to courses? I remember seeing you guys incorporate races or courses in practice with a lot of turns to practice for LA 2016 due to that course having a very, very different course geometry. How did you incorporate specificity into the training block for the Atlanta course? Because I believe the athletes got to preview the course at least a couple times or help give their input on what should be on the trials day. So how did you kind of structure training based off that knowledge that you had?
Kellen and I had seen the course in July, the day after she ran Peachtree.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the crew saw it in November. Mm-hmm. But myself, having seen it in July, I had been working on the schedule ever since, mm-hmm. and scoping out where I wanted to do things and tweaking. And by the time December came around, after they had seen it, I felt really strongly about the places that we should train for it. And what I noticed about the course was, I would say, the relentless nature of the hills, mm-hmm. was what I really made a note of. The fact that it was never flat.
Right.
You were never going to be running back-to-back miles exactly at the same time, right. with the same split. Right. So I wanted to make sure that we were picking courses that were relentless in that same way, mm-hmm. not necessarily trying to find – I'll use Jim Walmsley just as an example because people know his name. Mm-hmm. And Jim did great, by the way. But Jim did some epic stuff.
Yeah.
Some epic climbs and some epic downhills, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But just my personal opinion was that's not so much what we needed. It was just the constant nature of the hills that we needed to prepare for, and the constant pace change that was going to be happening. So particularly at the end of the race.
Right.
So almost every time we were on Lake Mary, our famous road that we train on, we were finishing from what we call mile mark 4 to mile mark 0, which is just like this, and it's a net up. Mm-hmm. So it has more up than down coming home, and that's what the Atlanta course was like. So mm-hmm. we were very used to that, and there's a mental component to that as well as a physical component. Mm-hmm. You physically get used to it, but mentally you feel prepared. Mm-hmm. Even when we did go down, let's say to Camp Verde, which is a much lower and much flatter course that we do, mm-hmm. we did pace change.
Right.
So that, okay, we didn't have the hills, but at least we were getting used to constantly changing pace. We also worked in the weight room. Mm-hmm. I told AJ and Wes, look, here's what we have to be ready for: constant up and down. Mm-hmm. And they prepared those folks in the weight room with all the, I can't get into all that they did. They're way above my pay grade. But all the exercises they were doing in there, we're preparing them as well. So we were taking a very comprehensive approach to the specificity, as you say.
Yeah. Did you bring in industrial fans and thousands of spectators to line the course to help with that stuff that appeared on race day too?
No, but I think I will say this, and I really believe this. You talked about it at the top. Train hard, race fearlessly, share the journey. That's our mission. Mm-hmm. We've always shared the journey. We've mm-hmm. always said yes to every interview. We've always said yes to every podcast and sure. article and everything else. So the hype around the trials to us, I don't think felt all that different to us. Yeah. It felt very much like New York or Boston or anything else that we do. We always hype ourselves up. Yeah. And so in some ways it was easier. We didn't really need to hype ourselves up because obviously all the media was covering it. So I think that helped us in a way, to be honest. It's not necessarily a question I've answered, and maybe it's the first time I'm giving this answer, but now that I think about it, I think that helped. We were not nervous. We were excited. I mean, we were nervous in a good way, but we weren't overwhelmed by nervousness and fear.
Right. What was your perception of Atlanta? Just being there. Do you have any thoughts about that?
So great.
That weekend? Yeah.
It was the greatest. I mean, It was the greatest. It was the best running event that I've ever been to in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And it's not close. Right. And it's not just because Alafine won. It's not just because we had a great day. It's because there were 500,000 people, I think. I don't know. They say 250 to 500,000, somewhere in that range, lining the course. Mm-hmm. I have never seen the Nielsen ratings, but it had to be unbelievable in terms of how many people watched on TV that day. And I think it was just a great day for our sport. It showed that our sport is healthy and strong, particularly in the marathon in this country. And I was just thrilled. It was just the greatest feeling. I mean, I was trying to watch that race, and it was 5 deep everywhere on that course. There's no way they could hear me. The only time anybody heard me was when I snuck into this spot with like a half mile to go where nobody was because everybody was at the finish at that point. Right. It was just the greatest. I have so much praise for the Atlanta Track Club and Rich Kana and Chris Hollis and their entire team, Jay Holder. They were quintessential hosts, and I wish we could have more days like that in this sport. It was really special.
Yeah, the orchestration of the water bottles alone is probably the biggest feat to come to a U.S.
Don't get me
running
started on that. I don't understand that, but it was good. It was great. They did
Totally.
great. Yes, you're right.
So after the trials, obviously Alafine won, qualified for the U.S. Olympic marathon team. Olympics get postponed. How are you guys just dealing with that overall? You mentioned you have highly ranked athletes that run for other countries, so they're obviously vying for Olympic spots. What are you incorporating in your training? You mentioned, athletes that might consider a spring marathon or now maybe considering going all in on track, maybe not. What's just the kind of general thought right now that you have with a huge event in 2020 being postponed a year?
Some of it was individual.
Yeah.
Obviously, for Alafine, it stinks.
Right.
You could try to find the positive narrative in there, and there's some silver linings, I suppose, but it stinks. It stinks for Steph.
Mm-hmm.
She's at the absolute pinnacle of her career. Her training this summer has been lights out. Mm-hmm. If the trials had been June 21st or whenever, I think it would have been right there. It's probably not the worst thing for Kellen. She had a tibial stress fracture at the trials, took her 8 weeks to recover. By June 20th, could she have been ready? Yes. She was in okay shape by then, but now she's in much better shape a month later.
Right.
And in 2021, she'll be in great shape. Matt Baxter was a little dinged up this spring, so for him, it's probably a good thing, and he's young, so it gives him that much more time to get fit and get the standard for New Zealand and the Olympic standard. Alice Wright, kind of the same way. Rory Linkletter the same way. So for a lot of the athletes, it's probably a blessing in disguise. We're just trying to take it realistically and honestly and pragmatically. We're not trying to sugarcoat everything, but once we accept and acknowledge the situation, then we move on. And
totally.
So for an athlete like Steph, athlete like Kellen, they're training their butts off right now. They're really fit. Mm-hmm. And we're going to try a couple of small races here that are lots of strict guidelines and things like that. And hopefully those are fun. And, eventually we'll be back. That's what I believe. I don't know when, but we will be back and we'll be ready.
One last topic on the subject of races. You guys raced against the Team Boulder at Buffalo Park, and then the team was here at a local park. That seems like a super interesting organic event, having things be virtual and live streamed at the same exact time. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be?
Sure. Lee Troop gets most of the credit for that. Lee's a good dude and a good friend, and he wanted to see if Jake and Scott Falble could set something up together. And I was not opposed to that, but it wasn't necessarily on our calendar. So I told them that we had this 2 mile on our calendar, and I said, but our whole team's doing it. Right. So it might be weird if just Jake could your whole team do it? And of course he was all for it. Right. The funny thing is Scott ended up not being able to do it, but he had a little setback that week, but it was all good. It all worked out and it was a lot of fun. And, we hyped it up, and the athletes had a really good time. Honestly, our athletes they weren't super jacked up about it right away, but I think as the hype built up, they got more pumped. Right. And then when we showed up that night to Buffalo, all these kids that were there. All these college kids that are training in town had seen it on social media, so they came to watch, which, maybe they should have, maybe they shouldn't. I can't get into all that. It's not my place. But they stayed away. It was fine. Mm-hmm. And we had a great time. And my point being, when our athletes saw that there were people there, right, then they got really pumped. And they ran really well. Ran really well. So, I thought that was an awesome event. I think moving forward, not that this is what you're asking me, but I'm thinking that we can have more of those type of things sprinkled in with a few very small, very strict traditional situations. Right. I don't think we can go full on traditional situation because there's too many logistics. Mm-hmm. But if we can have a little bit of both, that's my hope for the fall. Right. We'll see. Yeah, absolutely. We are fingers crossed, hoping, just excited about the possibility of athletes being able to toe the line. I'm sure when everybody got to put on the jerseys, do the final strides, they're like, okay, this is real again. This isn't just another workout necessarily. And when I saw the times that they ran, I've done one shakeout on Buffalo Park. I was like, they ran what now? What did they do? Well, I appreciate you saying that, because back in my day, because I lived at sea level my whole life, I trained one summer in Fort Collins, but I mostly just did base mileage. So I just didn't understand altitude back then. And I could see how someone would see Rory Linkletter running 9:12 or Steph Bruce running 10:19 on a dirt loop and think, well, who cares? I'm telling you, that is hard.
Yeah.
That is so hard.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, thank you for appreciating that.
Yeah, I just as soon as I saw the finish time, I just kind of paged out, and I was like, okay, I need to rethink everything, just kind of absorb that for a second. What is next for you guys? You mentioned maybe these small scale events. What's next generally on the horizon for you guys?
Yeah, so this Saturday, we are going to do a small, very strict, traditional track race, 5,000 meters, small field of men, small field of women, regional field. All the information will come out tomorrow. It'll be in Utah. All athletes from California, Colorado, Arizona, and Utah. All have been tested once before they leave. All will be tested again on site with a rapid test on Friday afternoon. Everybody in the stadium will wear masks that are not competing, and there'll be less than 50 people total in the stadium. Again, this will the final details will come out tomorrow, and it will be live streamed on Runner Space. I expect that the vast majority of the running fans are going to love it. There will be some people, of course, that just don't think anything that is going on should be going on. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I get that, and that is totally understandable. I empathize and understand that view. It's not my personal view, but it's not that far from my personal view either. Look at my hair. I haven't been to the barber. I haven't gone inside anywhere unless I absolutely have to be. Grocery store, gas station. I've been so careful, and so have our athletes. And I just want to keep the sport afloat. I'm not looking to thrive here. I'm just looking to keep it afloat. So that's my personal position. And we're going to do this meet on Saturday. So stay tuned for that. That info will come out tomorrow.
Awesome.
I think you'll be very excited about the field.
I am, you know me, so of course I'm going to be very excited. Cool. One last question. Where can people find out more information about you, more information about the team?
Yeah, we're easy to find. Like I said, everything's out there. If you go to NAZElite.com, that's our website. We currently have a pre-order for a bunch of new gear, and that's a great resource for fans of ours because it has all our history. Our training logs are on there. If you go to the nav bar, you got our shop page, our training logs. You got all our results from the entire history of the team back to 14. You could spend an hour. You can spend an hour or two on there. There's videos, podcasts. I did
this morning too, just a refresher.
So that's a great place. Instagram NAZ_Elite, Twitter NAZ_Elite. And Facebook, our Facebook fan page, if you type in NAZ Elite fan page, I'd highly recommend it because we've got over 1,000 people on there, and it's controlled. So it's a real positive place. You can say anything you'd like and interact with us. And we put out a workout Wednesday every week. It's kind of a cool place to be. It's cool. It's a cool community inside Facebook there for us. And then of course you can follow all the athletes. Just type in their names, look them up. They're all really cool follows in different ways. Some are really funny, self-deprecating. Some are really inspirational, motivational. Some are just goofy. I mean, it's a good bunch of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you again so much for coming on. We're super excited about the event. Like I mentioned, if anybody's watching this after the fact, we'll put all the links we talked about in the description here. Ben, thanks so much. We'll be back with another episode shortly. For now, everybody have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Evan.